Hi, I'm Bill Gaines, host of the Outdoor View, the place where we educate, connect, and learn to protect our outdoor traditions. Today we have with us again Amy Patrick from the Oregon Hunters Association. Amy's in charge of tackling IP13 up in Oregon, which is a pretty scary proposition that anybody who hunts and fishes needs to know about, whether you live in Oregon or not. But welcome back, Amy. Tell us a little bit about what you've got going on there in Oregon. Give us maybe a brief rundown for those people that maybe are tapping in for the first time. And then let's talk about some of the changes that have happened over the last few months up there on IP13.
Sure, sounds great. So as we talked about in December, IP13 is an initiative petition here in Oregon. Initially, it was aimed at getting on the ballot this fall in November of 2022. And what IP13 wanted to do, it billed itself as a strengthening of our animal abuse statutes. But when you read the text, what it really did is it was driven by an extreme vegan and animal rights agenda to create a no-kill sanctuary state in Oregon. So what it effectively would do is criminalize hunting, fishing, and trapping within the state, basically killing an animal for any reason other than self-defense. So there's a whole list of exemptions in our animal abuse statutes that protect things like good animal husbandry, fishing and hunting, even wildlife management practices. And what this group was seeking to do was remove those exemptions, which would in turn criminalize all of those activities, right down to trapping pests and vermin in your house. So it was pretty extreme. And so we started working really hard against that and stood up quite a coalition of sports groups. And what we have just found out recently is that they have pulled their initiative petition from the 2022 ballot, which sounds great. And we were pretty happy to see that. However, they had immediately refiled the same language as what is now called IP3 with the goal of getting it on the 2024 ballot. And interestingly enough, they have decided that to double down on their language. So they've kept all the stuff of IP13 that made it so egregious, and then they have added to it now in several ways with IP3. So now not only does it criminalize hunting, fishing, and trapping still, and it goes into animal ag issues. Now that they have refiled as IP3, they have actually gone further into some of the language and the verbiage and the statutes that really identify livestock and equine, and would make it easier to bring charges against farmers and ranchers. They remove the definition of good animal husbandry completely from our animal abuse statutes. They go so far as to remove the word cruelly from a sentence in the statutes that define animal abuse in the first degree. So the sentence usually reads, if you cruelly cause the death of an animal, which I think everybody could agree on. Well, they want to remove cruelly so that the sentence just says simply, if you cause the death of an animal, which is exceptionally broad. And where I live, it's a rite of passage to actually, you hit a deer, generally speaking, out here where we are in the country. Almost everybody has had that experience. And so when I read that sentence, that was my first thought was, well, gosh, if you accidentally hit a deer with your car, that's causing the death of an animal. Are you now, on the hook for animal abuse in the first degree? So they've made those changes, and they have very specifically made a change that directly goes after animal ag, where they have called out specifically the impregnation or masturbation of an animal, which speaks directly to artificial insemination, which is a widely accepted practice in ranching, farming, equine, even right down to domestic, cats and dogs and things like that. So very much they're really strengthening their play here. They're doubling down, like I said before, and really going after an even broader aspect with this new iteration.
Now, what do you think their strategy is, Amy? When we last talked during our last interview back in December, but you and I have talked several times since then as well, they were struggling to get signatures. They had until July, I believe, to get the signatures they needed for the November 2022 ballot. And they were struggling on that. They were struggling with fundraising. So conventional wisdom would say, wow, maybe we wrote this a little too broad. maybe we ought to scale it back a little bit. And that way we could get more people in support, get more people to agree to sign on, to get the petition on the ballot, so on and so forth. But they haven't done that. Like you say, they're doubling down, which really has me scratching my head.
Yeah, it's quite crazy, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot, actually, of why they might be taking this tactic. I think there's a few reasons. One is the finances, as you mentioned. We watched their finances very closely, and their account never broke $3,000. So not a well-funded campaign. But from watching their social media, I think that they are trying to attract some of the more extreme animal rights and vegan groups who are anti-farming and anti-animal ag, by going in and having stronger language in those areas. And so I'm wondering if they are trying to attract groups like that for financial backing. The other thing I would say is they were trying to gather signatures while we were still mostly in COVID protocols over the winter. So not great weather here in the Northwest, and not great, outdoor venues like the farmers markets that are very plentiful in Portland in the good weather. So I think their strategy is that now when they get the okay to gather signatures again, I believe they will have almost 2 full years to collect signatures. And they just weren't able to do it in the time frame that they had this last time. They had almost exactly a year, but like I said, it was mainly in bad weather, mainly in COVID protocols. So I believe that they're looking at that kind of 2-year extension of time to get out there and gather the signatures, because they will definitely need that length of time.
The last time I looked at the list of supporters that they had, I don't, you talk about the animal rights groups, the well-known ones, the well-funded ones, PETA, for example, the Humane Society of the United States, so on. I don't think any of the groups, at least the names that people are familiar with, I don't think any of them had come on board at all with IP13. That's right.
No, neither IP13 nor its counterpart in Colorado, IP16, the PAWS Act. None of those groups came on for that as well. And so I think those organizations are watching very closely what they're doing, but they've stopped short of jumping on the bandwagon, either financially or with support in social media.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Now you talk about process. You mentioned that once they get approved and they've got, the proposition itself approved, a big challenge always is what are they going to let them call it, right? Because they're always trying to misname these propositions, because frankly, most voters don't read any farther than the name. So if they can get the name that they want, let's Be Kind to Animals Act or something like that, I mean, people will sign on even though they don't know the guts of what the proposition will do. Where are you at in that process? They don't have the name approved yet, right?
No, they don't. Luckily, they have to go through the entire process all over again with IP3. So the initiative petition process, you submit to the Secretary of State, and then you have to, once it's accepted, you have to gather 1,000 signatures. Those initial signatures then qualify those people for a draft ballot title and summary. Once that has been drafted, there is a comment and appeal period. And we were very successful in the last iteration with IP13. There were 9 sportsmen's groups that submitted comments, and we were able to get the language strengthened and more truthful about what it did. They had soft words like prohibits hunting, and we were successful in getting terms like criminalizes hunting, to really make sure that folks understood what they were signing and what was going on there. So that process will happen all over again. We will have that opportunity to comment and possibly appeal before they get their final okay to again collect 112,000 signatures that they'll need to place it on the ballot. And so I think they will probably get those 1,000 signatures a little bit faster because they've built the support system already. And so I would foresee that within the next few months, we'll see that draft language coming out. We'll have that opportunity to comment and appeal. And then probably by the end of summer, I would think they would be able to start gathering signatures again. So again, they're going to have almost 2 full years to get those signatures. So want to make sure everybody understands this is not necessarily a win. This is just, you know, kind of a fallback, regroup, and we need to be ready to face this head on, because the fact that they'll have about 2 years to collect signatures should be concerning for everybody who's involved in it.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, I mean, you mentioned earlier, it does everything that IP13 proposed to do and more. I mean, like you say, trapping pests in your house. I mean, you can't set a mousetrap, right?
Right.
And as far as raising domestic animals, I mean, you know, cattle, sheep, you know, swine, whatever.
Right.
Good luck. I mean, so it would totally outlaw that in the state of Oregon, right? I mean, as far as for meat production anyway.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's interesting when you start thinking about how far reaching it could be. Because on the face of it, some people are like, well, I don't hunt or fish, and, you know, I love animals, or, you know, whatever. But when you start really looking at it and you get down to, okay, trapping pests and vermin, you get down to the fact that it would outlaw research and education with animals.
Right.
So, you know, we have a really great vet school over here at Oregon State University. That would be no more. You talk about things like 4-H and FFA, whether that's research with animals or education with animals, or if that's in another part of the statutes about how you can tether or cannot tether animals, whether that's abuse. And so you start getting down to these, you know, things that people are a little bit more familiar with when you start parsing it out. You know, for me, I went through 4-H and FFA, my kids did. We raise livestock, you know, to put in our freezer to help offset the grocery budget. You know, simple things like that, that I think some people may not realize will be criminalized or outlawed if IP3 now, you know, were to make the ballot.
This would impact everybody. I mean,
Yes.
everybody, even if it was just a mousetrap thing and they didn't do it. I mean, everybody would be impacted by this. It's just, it just boggles me. I can see something like this happening down in California, because everybody knows we're nuts down here, right? You know, but up in Oregon, and you know what, Amy, this is what scares me, right? It's if this happens to get on the ballot in Oregon, let's say it doesn't even pass. Let's say it gets on the ballot and it gets 40% of the vote or something like that. That'll be enough to motivate the proponents of this to say, hey, we're going to try it again in Oregon. Maybe then they scale it back a little bit or do what they think they need to do to push it over the top. But they'll look at states, all these deep blue states like California, boom, here they come, right? I mean, it'll be here in an absolute heartbeat. This is pretty scary stuff. And this certainly reaches far beyond the borders of the state of Oregon, that's for sure.
It does. And I actually was thinking about it the other day in the terms of fuel prices, which sounds a little crazy. But, you know, I found myself driving past a fuel station the other day, and I was like, oh, diesel is $5.30. That's great. And I thought, my God, why am I saying that's great? That's not great. It's only great because we've hit $6, right? And so now when it walks back down, you're like, oh, that's awesome. No, it's still terrible.
Right.
It's still very terrible. You've just been conditioned to think that it's a little bit better. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing with this, is they want to push the envelope so far that if they walk it back a little bit, people will be like, oh, that's not so bad. We'll vote for that. So that's exactly what we have to be watching for, and being really steadfast in our education about what this initiative petition actually means to everybody in Oregon and to the states around that are watching as well.
Right, absolutely. Now, as far as I know, you are in the lead when it comes to the hunting and fishing coalition, if you will, that is working to defeat this proposition. I'm sure that you're coordinating closely with the domestic, you know, animal industry and so on and so forth, right?
Correct. Yeah, we actually have 2 coalitions in Oregon that have been stood up to fight this. One is more of that farming and ranching focus. So we have Oregon Farm Bureau, the Cattlemen's Association, sheep growers, the dairy farmers, and Oregon Hunters Association. We work very closely with them in the legislature on a lot of things. And so we are in that coalition as well. And then we started seeing that hunters and anglers were going to need our own messaging. And so that's when we stood up the Sportsmen's Coalition. And so we have a very, very just broad depth of sportsmen's groups who are involved, everybody from Rocky Mountain elk backcountry hunters and anglers. I mean, we've got a lot of the fish folks in there, whether they're state centric or national. We're seeing so much great engagement across the board. So we're really prepared. Everybody who has kind of come on board with these coalitions, even though we've been in a watch and see mode strategy wise right now with IP13 and now IP3, everybody is committed that if this gets legs and goes forward, we're ready to stand up a no on IP3 campaign. And everybody's right there shoulder to shoulder, whether it's ranchers, farmers, or hunters.
Right. Well, like I said earlier, whether you live in Oregon or not, I mean, you should be paying close attention to what's happening up there when it comes to what is now IP3. So if people want to learn more and just stay on top of what's really going on with IP3, maybe even help out, how did they contact you, or who should they contact up there? Is there a website they can go to, or what's the best way to tap in?
So at Oregon Hunters Association, we keep an IP. It was IP13, so now we've transitioned to IP3. A page directed specifically for updates on that. And so if you go to our website, which is Oregon Hunters, got to make sure we get the S in there, OregonHunters.org, and you go to our legislative news, you'll find a link there for our IP13, IP3 update page. I try to update that very regularly, so there's already information on there about IP3 and what that means. And so that's a great source for folks to go to and just try to find the most recent stuff. My contact information is on there as well. And so if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Always happy to, spread the information and the education around on that.
Absolutely. And I urge everybody that cares about a future of hunting and fishing, whether it be in Idaho or in Oregon or wherever, that they pay close attention to this and certainly help out if they can.
Yeah.
One more comment. You talk about fishing. This is not just recreational fishing. I mean, Oregon's got a pretty substantial commercial fishing industry as well, not to mention, all the coastal towns and so forth to depend on that.
Right.
It would shut that down too, right?
Right. And a lot of our coastal towns have already been hit hard with the timber industry issues, and have very much turned to tourism, which was, when the environmental groups came out hard against timber production, that was the mantra. We'll just turn to tourism to replace those jobs. And now we've got something that would come through and threaten to just take the legs out from underneath the tourism. All the, fresh seafood festivals up and down the coast would cease to exist.
Yeah, we talked about how nobody's safe from this, whether it could be 100% vegan, they're still not safe from this in a variety of ways. I mean, it would be a massive hit to the Oregon economy. It really would. And everybody's impacted by that, right? Yeah, so
definitely.
Yeah. Well, people should be paying close attention to this, Amy. And I thank you for coming back on today. It's amazing because December, we're in, well, that's only 4 months ago, right?
Yeah.
A little bit over 4 months ago, and things have changed drastically on this. And it looks like it's going to be something that we're going to be watching for a while now. So I'll stay in close touch with you. And when things change to the point where it's like the Outdoor View's got to do another update on this, I'm going to grab you and get you back on and let you educate our viewers on exactly where things are. So
absolutely. Always happy to keep people in the loop on things.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amy. And thank you for your hard efforts up there to try to keep people out in the field and on the water. Much appreciated for your leadership.
Thanks, Bill.
And thank you to our viewers for tuning in to the Outdoor View today. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on our website at www.theoutdoorview.org and on our YouTube channel.